Welcome, I'm Natasha Zouves. Tracy Walder has come face to face with terrorists in her role at the CIA, sent in to extract information to keep all of us safe. And in this episode, she shares how to build rapport instantly, what she learned from a young terrorist who had a penchant for blue M&Ms. And she also talks about surviving sexual harassment and bullying at work, some of the worst of it from other women at the FBI and at Quantico. She also says what you should do immediately if you feel like you're being followed. She's the author of The Unexpected Spy. It's currently in development with Netflix. Here's our conversation. Tracy Walder, welcome. It's so good to see you.
For having me, Natasha.
How did you get into all of this? How did you start at the CIA and then the FBI?
You know, I would love to say that it's this big, sexy story, right? But it's not. I grew up, so I'm I guess, a little bit older, 46, 47. And so at that time, we didn't have pop culture like kids do, right? Today with like Homeland, Criminal Minds, all those shows. So I did not know that the CIA was this job that was readily available to me, I guess, is the best way to describe that. I wanted to be a high school history teacher. But in 1997, I was watching CNN. And two journalists, Peter Arnett and Peter Bergen, were interviewing this guy in a cave with two AK-47s next to him. And that was Osama bin Laden. And we have to remember in 97, terrorism wasn't, I think, top of mind for a lot of people. It was something that was occurring, I guess you could say in quotes, over there, right? It wasn't something that I think Americans felt was impacting them. And so being I think it was 19 when I watched that. It was during that interview he issued his declaration of war against the United States. And so I wanted to find out more. What is this? Like, who is this person? It was at a career fair one day at USC, and I saw that there was a sign for the CIA and they were looking for liberal arts majors. And so I was a history major, and I knew that they worked foreign things. And so I went up to them and I said, do you work this Al-Qaeda issue? And he said, yes. It was a small group, and we do. And I said, well, I have my resume because I'm actually applying for another internship in the Senate here. And, if they call, great, right? And they called, and I felt like it was an opportunity I think I needed to take, I guess.
That's incredible. And I know that your work took you to 9 countries, I believe, many of them in the Middle East, and that in many instances you came face to face with terrorists and interviewed terrorists. What was that like?
I think to go to a country where the life expectancy is 47, which is basically my age now, and to come face to face with individuals who joined these groups actually out of desperation of having nothing, was really good, quite frankly, for me to be exposed to, because I think that actually helps us create solutions to problems when we can try. I'll never be able to put myself in their shoes, nor do I necessarily want to, right? I don't ascribe to what they believe in. But at the same time, I think being able to sit face to face with someone who wasn't all that much older than I, and understand why they did what they did, helps us create policies and strategies to keep other individuals from engaging in this behavior. So,
and tell me more about that, because I seem to remember there was one instance, there was a young man who was basically the same age as you, and you described that as a life-changing interview with a specific terrorist. He was recruited, I believe, when he was 14 or 15. Tell me more about that.
So even younger than that. So I was, I think, 24 when I spoke to him, and he was 27-ish. And I was trying to get information from him about a house that we knew had something in it that they shouldn't have. I'm trying to sort of talk around it. So ultimately I had a goal, right, in speaking to him. But I think a lot of times we see on TV that it's this acrimonious relationship. The reality is he's in custody, right? Like, the job is done. And so I need to establish a rapport with him, right, to ultimately gain information. And so I asked him a really simple, I guess we could say stupid question, but I thought I knew the answer to it. And so I asked him, why did you do this? Why did you ascribe to, Al-Qaeda and this terroristic ideology? I thought I knew the answer. Oh, you're a fanatic, right? I thought I knew the answer to that question. But his response really changed my perspective on why people become terrorists. And he said he was about 8, 9 years old. He wasn't even sure how old he was, to be totally honest, which is obviously different for me. He didn't even have a birth certificate. And he was in a country that I think we would consider today to be a failed or a fragile state. So what that means is that these countries cannot meet the basic needs of their citizens, right? So no financial system, really no healthcare system, none of that. and he had been abandoned by his parents. He was living in like a sewer storm drain, those large kind of storm drains that we see. He had completely unchecked hepatitis. It had taken over his whole body. He really didn't have anything over a 5 or 6 year old education, didn't know how to read, didn't know how to write. And a member of Al-Qaeda found him on the street, a very high-ranking member, and said to him, hey, do you want food? Do you want clothing? Do you want medication? We can provide all of that to you. You just have to fight for us. And he said yes. And I am not excusing his behavior. He is a terrorist. He killed people. He is responsible for the deaths of Americans, and he needs to pay for that. But at the same time, I think if we can enact policies that help some of these failed or fragile states, people will turn to their governments for their support rather than to these terrorist organizations who are really just filling a void.
Yeah.
That was there.
That is, I mean, I got chills as you were telling that story. And I think that when we talk about vacuums that exist in countries, that story paints such a picture to the situation that arises when there is no economy that a man can participate in. There is no education. There's no way for him to support himself. There is no infrastructure. Vacuums like that, I'm sure, is where terrorism thrives. Was that the same young man that you developed the rapport using blue M&Ms, or was that a different case?
So that was a different individual, actually much more higher ranking individual than him. I'm sorry that I can't say who it was. But yes, so again, it's about establishing commonalities sometimes with these individuals. And I know that sounds strange. I don't have anything ideologically the same as a terrorist, right? I don't share any of that, but we're all humans, right? And so trying to establish that rapport gets me the information that I need and correct information, because sometimes they give wrong information, and that's not good. And so this individual, we have MREs, we're in particularly war-torn countries. So, I mean, that's a full day's worth of calories. And what would happen?
And just so everyone knows, that those are meals ready to eat. And they taste pretty awful typically, right? They come in like a little baggie. They last for years or decades. And it's like the dehydrated lasagna. And, you know, maybe if you're lucky, you'll get a little bag of candy in there.
Yes. So here's the thing on MREs, Natasha. It depends what tastes good and what doesn't taste good. There are some things that are absolutely disgusting that are in MREs, but I prefer it. I really liked the bean and cheese burritos rehydrated. Those tasted really good. But when you're out in the field at black sites, you're not eating regular food. Where are you going to get it from? And so that's why we have the MREs. But one of the things that we would do is sort of like our base camp is if we didn't like certain things that were in them, we actually just created a bin of like unused goods that you can, if you didn't feel like having your MRE, maybe you could look and see what was in this person's MRE that they didn't want, if that makes any sense. And a lot of times, like you mentioned, there's like a goodie in the MRE. So the goodie, if you're really lucky, is peanut butter and crackers, but those went in like 2 seconds. But then also you'd have M&Ms that were usually broken and crushed, but whatever, right? People were just excited to have food. And so this individual in particular, there were already, someone had been eating them and was looking at them. And he's like, I like M&Ms. And I think, you know, one person was just basically like, too bad, so sad, you're not getting any. But I took sort of note of that. And I was like, oh, you like plain, like peanut, like what's your thing? And he's like, oh, I just like the blue one. And I was like, they all taste the same, but okay. And so I went and I looked in the MRE bin that we had, the treat bin. And I found a couple packages, and I mean, they were kind of broken, but I picked out the blue ones and I brought them to him the next day. And ultimately, he gave me the correct information of where something was that I was looking for.
That is so interesting, because I think that's the intersection of really active listening, right? I mean, there was another person there who was sort of like, okay, tough luck.
Yes.
And recognizing what that person values and trying to build that kind of rapport. What would you say, and this was a question that came up from a viewer, what did you learn from interviewing terrorists and interrogating terrorists about building rapport that all of us can use ethically in our day-to-day lives?
Commonality, finding that commonality, because the reality is we're all humans, so we all have a commonality in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's how we recruit human assets, right? People think it's that we blackmail them. That's actually not true. That's a really bad asset recruit, to be honest with you. We find a common ground with them so that they trust us and are willing to work with us. And so I think commonality.
What is the quickest way to de-escalate a conversation or situation that's getting out of control?
I know this sounds strange, but actually calmness. that is what I have found to be the best de-escalation technique, not meeting people where they are, meeting people where they should be and modeling that. And so what I have found, especially in talking with terrorists or people in general, is when they're angry and screaming and shouting, myself screaming and shouting and escalating is modeling where I'm thinking the conversation should be too. If I think the conversation needs to be lower or at a different note, modeling the tone of my voice of where that conversation should be will sometimes de-escalate.
So even if your heart is pounding out of your chest on the inside, being the thermostat rather than the thermometer in that situation.
That thermostat,
I like that.
Great description.
Have you ever been underestimated?
I mean, all day, every day. I mean, I'm wondering if you feel that way ever too sometimes.
Way to turn the question around. We'll start with you. And just in case people are listening instead of watching, Tracy Walder is a stunning, bright-smiled blonde who radiates warmth and kindness. And it is hard to reconcile that. Not to mention growing up in SoCal, I believe you were part of the DG sorority at USC, and you went down this totally different path. So tell me, how do you deal with people underestimating you? And do you feel that ultimately it's become your superpower in some situations? Because I know at the FBI, they would often put suspects in your car, to drive back to get that information. I believe there was a neo-Nazi event that they had you attend because you were so unassuming and so young. They thought you were the one for the job. So tell me more about the experience of being underestimated, the frustration of it, and the ultimate superpower that it may have ended up being.
Yeah, I think it has become my superpower. I think it is a superpower. It used to be a really frustrating superpower, I guess. And I used to try to mold myself or want to mold myself into something different, but it never felt right. Right. And so I still deal with it constantly. I mean, I have to be honest, I've been on NewsNation before, right? And commented on, terrorism or Gaza or Ukraine, right? I mean, those are the things I'm typically talking about. And I will get emails that say, why am I listening to you? I would love to hear a man speaking about this instead. And that's very frustrating, but I've learned to just hit the delete button because that's on them. That's not on me, right? And I think I used to get very, very upset about things like that. And I just don't anymore. I am always underestimated. I think part of my problem, this is a big fault of mine, is that because I am usually happy, smiling, whatever, when I do flip a switch and I get angry, people are shocked because I do have a very no-nonsense approach to things. And I think that people have a hard time reconciling that sometimes, right? And so they forget. My favorite comeback to people was that, do you think I served in the CIA and FBI because I was like nice all the time? Like, what is it that you expect sort of from that? But just in terms of gaining the upper hand, sometimes professionally or personally, because people will think I'm dumb or whatever, they'll talk more to me. And I just use that to my advantage because the way I see that is, again, that's a them problem, not a me problem. And so I'm going to use it the best way that I can.
But let me ask you about this. What has it been like being a beautiful woman in the CIA and the FBI? Specifically making the transition from the CIA to the FBI. What was that like? And what role did men play in that experience? And surprisingly to me, what role did women play in that experience as well?
At CIA, I really didn't have too much negative experience with the opposite sex or the same sex, quite frankly. We all worked together pretty well. I didn't experience much of that. And I just assumed that the FBI would be the same. But I think there were kind of two issues at play with the FBI that I don't think I really realized. The first was at the time, the FBI really hated the CIA and blamed the CIA for September 11th. And I think some of that animosity obviously made me a target, right, during Quantico and my time there, because I was the only person at Quantico at that time who had come from CIA. So let's just put all of our frustration on Tracy. So I don't think it would have mattered if I was a male or a female necessarily. But I do think there are 40 people in a class and like 6 women. And again, I was used to being the only woman. A lot of times at CIA wasn't weird. And so I didn't think much of it, but I think we view the gathering of intelligence versus law enforcement as two very different skill sets and two very different things. And I think because I refuse to engage in what I call performative masculinity, I think it really frustrated people. And because I was starting to experience some bullying and those kinds of things, I withdrew. I am the kind of person that if people are being mean or not nice, I'm not interested in changing their opinion about me. I just become very quiet and sort of withdraw. And that can be perceived, I understand, as, the not nice word to call a female doing that, but that's just who I am. And I think it really frustrated people that I wouldn't, I guess, bend to their ways and what they wanted me to do.
Well, and there was a specific situation where you were required to wear a suit.
Right.
Would you mind telling me more about that?
I wore that same suit actually to brief the Saudis once. So obviously no one had an issue with it at CIA. So why in the world would anyone have an issue with it at FBI? And your very first modules are like 3 weeks long there, is interviewing, like learning how to interview suspects, learning how to interview victims, all those things. And so when you're doing that, they ask that you actually not wear a uniform. They want you to get used to wearing a suit. Fine. I had the suit. So why wouldn't I wear it? So I wore it, did my thing, and I was told that I had to come to the head of Quantico's office afterwards. I was like, what did I do? I thought everything went well. And I had to, he asked me to apologize to my instructor because I made him uncomfortable in my suit.
What does uncomfortable mean?
I mean, I think it means a lot of things that are maybe not appropriate, for this discussion, but, I was told that I made him sexually uncomfortable. So I think that's kind of where that goes.
Yeah. Okay. And this was from a superior or
Yes.
who is this?
So for each module that you have there, you have sort of like this lead instructor, if that makes any sense. And typically it's a more senior agent, right? Maybe it's someone that's been there 10 years, 15 years. And so it was this particular module instructor.
Yeah. And I know the bullying started spiraling and from some disappointing places as well. Can you talk to me about the women?
Yeah.
And can you talk to me about the shower situation? Because there's a communal shower at Quantico. Is that right? Tell me more about this.
Yeah, it's weird. You would have thought that, this is why women sometimes have issues. It's like, why can't we just support each other all the time? But instead, I think we're in this like competition with each other or want to tear each other down. And I think I was the most surprised by how awful the women were. But when I reflect on it, and I'm not giving them a pass under any circumstances, but when I reflect on it, I do feel like some of it was that they just didn't want to be me. And so to distance themselves from that, engage in the behavior and treat me as horribly as possible to make sure that they're also not.
Yes, because in the system of abuse, when you were the lowest person, and you were being the absolute visible and public target of bullying, they just wanted to distance themselves from you as much as possible, and they joined in that system of abuse. What comments were made after you took those communal showers with the other women?
Yeah, so I had a surgery back when I was at CIA. I had a really large tumor in my breast removed. It was not cancerous or anything like that, but obviously it had to be removed. And you take communal showers. I'm like not a modest person. I definitely didn't care. Also, like when you've been pepper sprayed, you're getting all these things. You just want to take a shower. You don't care if people are there. And I have a scar. I have a pretty prominent scar there. I never really thought much about it. But they started spreading rumors that I had breast implants and that people, when we're, doing hand-to-hand combat, should try to hit me in the breast to see if they could puncture one. I don't have breast implants. You do you if you have them. Great. But it was just like, what? This is where we're going with this? It had nothing to do with anything. It was just my body. Right. And so it was just surprising.
And I know all of this culminated with a specific comment that really was the reason you decided to leave the FBI behind. What was that?
Yeah, so I'm sorry to be so graphic on this. Not usually.
I'm grateful you're willing to go there.
Yeah,
I think this experience is so much more common. And I know there are so many elements of it that I am personally relating to. And I'm like, yes, I did not even go to war-torn countries. I did not, interrogate people. I did not gather information. I did not participate in arrests. And Yes, a lot of this rings true for me as well. So thank you for your candor.
And it's
Tell me about this specific moment.
Yeah, and to your point, yesterday I talked to the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, but only the females. That's who I talked to yesterday. So nothing in common professionally, right, with them. But we unfortunately had so much in common in terms of our like lived experiences, right? And that was really disturbing to hear. But yes, obviously I made it through Quantico. I graduated. I went to my office, and I got called into my SSA, or Supervisory Special Agent's office, and he told me that I was doing a very good job kind of clearing these cases that he had given me. And so obviously I was happy to hear that, but he said, you'd be an even better agent on your knees under my desk. And I think it was at that point, so interesting though, I was like desensitized to it, if that makes any sense. And so I had these like weekly dinners with my dad. And so I had a dinner with him that night. And I told my dad what happened. And he was just like, how, in what world, Tracy, you just like gloss over this? Like, this is okay. It's not okay. And yeah, he made me really realize it wasn't okay.
What went through your mind when that man said that to you?
I think anger, and then obviously frustration later. But
yeah. I'm so sorry that you went through all of this, and I'm so grateful that you're sharing it. And as I said, so many parts of it really resonate with me so much. And I know with so many other women, you have seen so much and experienced so much. How has it affected you long term? I know you've been very open about mental health. Tell me more about this.
Yeah, it's definitely affected me. I'd be lying, right, if I said that it didn't. I think that for me, sort of laughing it off and smiling all the time, that is how I deal with sometimes uncomfortable situations. That's just where my brain goes. And that's okay. But I have to acknowledge that, right?
Well, and you say you actually had a therapist or a psychologist say, Tracy, did you notice you do something?
Yes.
Can you tell me more about that?
Well, did you notice that either I shut down the conversation or I smile and make sort of like this joke, laugh out of the conversation? And I'm glad, right, that I was made aware of that, because I don't think I realized that I was doing it. But I think that at CIA and FBI, it becomes a problem dealing with mental health, because you could lose your security clearance, or you can lose your gun, your access to a gun, right? If you have mental health issues, not always, but a lot of the time. And so people don't want to talk about it, right? Or people don't want to get treatment for it, because you do have to disclose the medication that you're on, which is interesting. And yes, the FBI, when I applied there, I was taking medication for depression. And I thought that it would be my numerous back surgeries that might be an issue for them, because, those are large surgeries. No. What was holding me up a little bit in the background was the fact that I was taking medication. And I remember thinking, like, isn't it actually good that I'm doing something about it, right? Like, isn't that what you would want? It's someone who's acknowledging that they're doing something about it. And so I think that you have that stigma, right, associated. For me, what I saw that was happening was people were finding inappropriate ways to cope, alcohol, those kinds of things.
Yeah. How common is alcoholism and substance abuse in the CIA and FBI?
So substance abuse, not so much, because you do have drug testing and those kinds of things, and you need to pass, right? And so I would not say that there was as much. I don't want to say it doesn't exist. I am certain that it does. But I would say what I saw all the time was pretty large scale alcohol abuse, right? That was a big issue, not just drinking to drink. I would go out with my friends and have a good time, of course. But we're talking coping, drinking it constantly, being drunk on the job, those kinds of things I saw people coping with. And when I left, one of the things I realized, and I don't think people realize, is we are not considered veterans at all, in any way, shape, or form. So we are not entitled to any kind of veterans benefit. So I'm lucky I have a husband that has health insurance, right? And so I'm covered under that, and I can get health care and all the things that I need for mental health under that. But some people don't have that luxury. And so they turn to unhealthy ways to cope. And the CIA and the government really wasn't providing for it. So I rage tweeted my my senator, actually, who's the head of the Intel committee. And I was just like, we're not being covered and taken. I mean, it was a tweet. And he wrote back, and we passed a $10 million bill July of 2023 to establish an Office of Mental Health and to help individuals who have left the CIA under good terms who need mental health care. So
congratulations, Tracy. What an incredible thing. What an incredible thing. That's so important. And this, you know, also relates to another question that came up. What happens to your family life, to your dating life
Yeah.
when you join the CIA? Because I understand that your mom didn't speak to you for like 2 weeks
Well, when she found out that I was going.
when she first found out that you joined. Tell me more about that.
So, look, my mom is the best mom in the whole wide world. There's no question. But I think that she grew up at a different time, right? She's a boomer. And so I think for her, you know, we don't go to college. We don't have these jobs. We don't do things like this. And so I think she just needed time to process that. And once she did, she was all in. I mean, she went with me to my interviews, all the things. It just took her some time to like process what I think she had in her mind as to what her daughter.
What did she say do you remember when you initially told her?
I mean, do you really want to know?
Yes.
I'll tell you, it might just be insensitive. She said, Tracy, pretty Jewish girls aren't supposed to do this. That's what she said to me. And so, you know, spoken like a true Jewish mom. I mean, it's not, it just is what it is, right? And that's what she said to me. And it was very hard for her to kind of come to terms with that. She needed her space, I guess, to deal with it. And that's okay. She's been crazy supportive ever since. But yes, that is exactly what she said to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And tell me about the layers of secrecy in your life, because when you would go overseas, you would use an alias, I'm assuming. Would your family have any idea what you were doing? And what does that kind of secrecy do to you?
Yeah. So no, they don't have any idea. They don't have access to that information. So you actually have to appoint a friend who's at the agency to be your power of attorney. And so my friends at the agency, I mean, they were bridesmaids in my wedding. I'm still incredibly close to them. I don't think you realize that they become really your family, right? So she was designated that person, and she would communicate with my mom. You know, I would message her on our system and be like, hey, I'm great. You tell my mom, you know, and she would tell her. And so, because she had access to my identity and all of that. But it really is a mind mess if you think about it. I mean, having to transit through airports and then getting another flight home, then the same day, having to switch identities, praying no one recognizes you, right? It's tough.
Absolutely. What was dating like in the CIA?
Yeah. So I mean, this is bad, but it's encouraged. I really only dated, you know, men within the CIA. It's easier, to be totally honest with you. And it's not necessarily discouraged. I did not date superiors ever. It was always people that were the same, I guess, level that I was. I just happened to be my age range, so it wasn't an issue. But I really only dated within the CIA, which I know can be toxic, but at the same time, it actually helps people.
Well, it makes sense because
Yeah.
it's a very unusual kind of life, and it's someone who automatically understands the rigors of all of it, and the secrecy and the intensity, right? I would imagine if you're just dating a, you know, accountant, nothing against accountants at home, they're like, you're never here and you're gone for months and I
Right.
can't contact you.
Yes.
And you can't tell me anything about what you do or who you're speaking with. Like,
Here.
it's very hard. It's very hard to date outside of it.
Obviously, sometimes it can be awkward. You break up, right? Like, and it's not a good breakup. And, you know, those kinds of things can be stressful. But I don't remember it ever being like so bad that I couldn't come to work, if that makes sense.
There was one particularly bad breakup. This guy broke up with you for all the wrong
Oh,
reasons.
yes.
Do you want to tell me more about this?
You know, you do run into people with egos, right? I know that's shocking. And I had been briefed or read into this program that just 3 of us in the office were briefed into, because people don't realize just because you're in the same office doesn't mean everyone has the same access. And he was really pissed that he did not have access to this program. And he kept asking, may I have, tell me. I'm like, no, I can get fired for doing that. And he's like, well, then I don't want to be with you anymore. I can't handle this. Okay.
Let me ask you about resilience, because I think it's always interested me what you would not know about a person by looking at them on the outside. And I think looking at you, obviously, you would not guess the level of intensity of your work in the past, the countries it's taken you to, coming face to face with terrorists, all of that. But I think even earlier than that, many people would not know that you were born with a developmental disability, which you've been very open about, and that you were bullied relentlessly as well. Tell me more about that. What would people not know about you from the outside? And tell me about the role of resilience in your life and what you've learned.
I think people wouldn't know that I actually am an introvert, and I am definitely insecure sometimes. That would be an understatement. And I think we don't realize the toll that bullying takes on us. I don't think the bullies won because I think I've made a success out of myself,
Mhm.
but it does impact you on a day-to-day basis. And the reality is I much prefer to stay home by myself, and I am very skeptical of people and new people that I meet. And so I'm not someone that embraces tons and tons and tons and tons of friends. I have a very, very close circle of very, very good old long-term friends. That's just how I am. And I know I don't necessarily always seem that way, but I am. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because there is such a warmth to you, but I would imagine, given your training and history, there is an understanding that not every person deserves every part of you, and also information is privileged, and that trust and loyalty needs to be earned, between people over time. There are a few questions that have to do with sort of news you can use topics, so I
Okay,
think I want to transition into that
great.
with the time we have left. Tell me about situational awareness and what you carry forward and how you assess a situation when you walk into it, whether it's a movie theater with your family or a concert venue. Because I will say, I was doing an interview with a former sex worker in South LA who worked some of the most dangerous streets and survived, through 15 years of really dangerous work. And I'd never met anyone who had such a level of situational awareness, where being in a car with her, to her taking me, through South Figueroa, actually, not too far
I know
from
exactly where
USC,
that is. Yes.
at a bad time of night, I didn't notice anything had shifted.
Mm.
But she describes it as something in the air shifts. And she, a couple minutes before anything happened, said, "We need to get out of here.
Okay.
Something has changed here." And just about a minute and a half later, there were gunshots and there was a
Wow.
murder nearby.
Wow.
So tell me more about the situational awareness that was trained into you and what you are looking for when you're out in the world that all of us can learn.
So I think the situational awareness, that calmness that I talked about before, is so important. I think a lot of us in catastrophic situations are not calm, right? It's that fight or flight. We kind of, our adrenaline goes up. It's that idea that was trained out of me, that I remain calm. And when you can remain calm, you can become very aware of your surroundings, right? You can become, just as that woman was speaking with you, the whole idea that you have noticed that there has been a atmospheric shift, if you will, in a room or in a situation. If you remain calm and don't have that high level of cortisol, you can start to pick up on those things. But yes, whenever I'm in a building, I'm always looking for what the exit is, right? Always. I think that's just something that's always trained into me. And also, I think, sounds so silly and simple, but I always have the GPS enabled, for my husband and other people on my phone so that they know exactly where I am at all times. He's not using it to spy and track on me because he doesn't trust me. It's something I want because I think it's a good thing to be aware of.
So you have location sharing on, and you're sharing it with your loved ones at all times. There was a question, best language you can learn today.
Gosh, Chinese. I think Mandarin. That's what I think, but people may disagree with you.
Do you think that it ranks above English?
Yes, I believe it does. There's a lot of research that has come out in articles that state that it will become the most common language ahead of English, and I believe that.
What is the best thing you can do if you feel that you're being followed either in a car or if you're walking?
I think the first thing you need to do is call the police on your phone. I think you can never overuse that. There's nothing wrong with that. If you think you're being followed in your car, don't go home. Take your car to a police station, to a place where there are a lot of people around. So I think those are the things you can do.
Yeah, and what if you're walking?
I think walking is the same, right? I would never want to take someone to my home or to a place where my daughter's school or something like that. I think taking them to a place where there are a lot of people, even I think we underestimate grocery stores and how many people are in them and how many people are able to help us. And a lot of them are open 24/7 and are close by, closer than a police station. And so I think that's something we need to think about.
I think there are so many aspects that I am taking away from today. I mean, you are such a whole individual. We didn't just talk about your experience at the CIA or workplace stuff or foreign policy. It's, I think, how does one navigate really challenging, really toxic workplace environments? How do you maintain a sense of self and cope with things that are really heavy and that stay with you long after you leave a situation or an event or a, organization? Ultimately, how do you triumph over, difficulties that you've been dealt and difficulties along the way. It's a beautiful thing. Tracy Walder, thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha. I appreciate it.